Well, everybody, this is day 2 of Andrew Colborn's deposition taking place between 9:02 a.m. and 4:40 p.m. in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at East Michigan Street, Suite 1800 at Godfrey Kahn, SC. Reported by Paula Houtenranch, 365 Reporting, and videographed by John Henson. Burning book come out before Ken Kratt's book came out, before Mike Griesbach's Indefensible book came, because of Making a Murder preceded all of those. Question. So I'll move to strike because you're speculating, and I'm just asking you based on your knowledge, personal knowledge. Do you know if any of those callers had watched Making a Murder? Ms. Burnett, let me object to the form of foundation in question, but go ahead. All I know is that it didn't receive any of these type of calls prior to release of Making a Murder. Question. Okay. So the answer to my question is, do you know? Right? Correct. So my colleague who listened to the 89 voicemails noted that very few callers mentioned their location, but those who did were from out of town. Does that sound right to you? And out of the country, but yes. So locally, no one except for John Hartraub and Kevin Hartlaub. Hartlaub, locally no one was calling or confronting you in person in a critical way, correct? So what do you consider locally? Within Manitowoc County? Okay. Well, I gave you the example of the service. Other than that, in Manitowoc County, I don't know. I don't believe so. No one in Manitowoc County, I believe, called. I don't recall. I've had to look at my entire list of phone numbers, but as you see here today, you don't recall that. No. The people who left anonymous voicemails, you don't plan to call them to trial to testify on your behalf, do you? No. Okay, and that's in part because you don't know who they are, correct? Yes, that's correct. And you haven't identified any of them as witnesses in your discovery responses, correct? No. And of all of you know, some of these people were sitting in prison or a mental institution somewhere, correct? You don't know? Correct. You do know that some of them were convicted felons, correct? I'll show you an example to a document to jog your memory. Thank you. Could you go get Exhibit B or Exhibit 8? Do I have that? Yeah, got it. And flip about 20 pages into the tracking number 355, and if you could, 356. Okay. And this to refresh your memory, this isn't a transcript of the interview you gave for convicting a murderer, correct? Well, it's my answers. Again, like I said yesterday, the question doesn't appear. Okay? And I can't determine which interview it is, but it's either interview one of the two convicting a murder interviews. Okay. So I'm going to start reading at the top of the third row. Unwisely, I invited him to. Question. I don't need it. Mr. Colborn, would you agree that by definition the people who left those voicemails for you were unreasonable? Yes. No reasonable person would react this way to a documentary, correct? I've had reasonable people question me about it, yes. Well, what's not my question? No reasonable person would watch a documentary and then call and leave a death threat, correct? Well, I would hope not, but maybe your definition of reasonable and mine might be different. What about under your definition? I could see how someone could be so moved by such a production that they may contemplate it. And follow through? You think that's reasonable? No, I don't think that's reasonable. Okay. So now I want to talk a little more about Miss Muir. You didn't list her in your interrogatory responses, and I think your explanation from that yesterday was you haven't talked to her about the facts. Underlying facts in this case are the lawsuit, correct? That is correct. And you testified yesterday that she has no knowledge of your damages, that you don't have any physical manifestation, anxiety, or distress that she could observe, correct? Well, I did correct that by saying she is aware that I have hypertension. Okay, but otherwise, nothing she can observe? Correct. And that's true even though the two of you live together? Yes. Exhibit 81 marked for identification. I'm going to hand you what we've marked as Exhibit 81, so this is text between you and Miss Maurer, correct? Answer, correct. And you texted her, Jody, as you may have suspected, the whole Avery case was and continues to be a thorn in my side. Your continued support means more to me than you can possibly imagine. Thank you very much for the bottom of my heart. And then your counsel reacted something. Jody responded, and I'm sorry you had to. And I'm in Exhibit A. Okay, Exhibit 1, which is your initial letter. Got it. And I'm at number 63. Okay. So let me rephrase the question. You agreed to number 61, and you agreed to number 62, that the relationship with Miss Maurer harmed your marriage, and it harmed your relationship with your children. Answer, yes. And I'm trying to understand how you can deny that none of this caused you anxiety, distress. Can you explain that? Well, I guess I can rephrase. Did the divorce cause you anxiety? Answer, sure. Did the divorce cause you distress? I don't know about anxiety, though. So, what's the word? I'm not exactly sure of the difference in definition between the two, but I would say it certainly caused me some distress. Yes. Yes, I see it. You told the interviewer, when I announced my retirement, I received calls from tens, if not hundreds, of people who thanked me or told me that I had helped them through a difficult time, or they were glad that I did this or glad that I did that. And numerous people have apologized to me for not coming forward. Did I read that correctly? Answer, yes. So, we had asked you to stipulate to the following statement. Upon announcing his retirement, Mr. Colborn received supportive calls from dozens of people. Here you said you received calls from tens, if not hundreds, of people. So my question is, will you stipulate to the statement? I'll read it again. Upon announcing retirement. Where is this statement? Yeah, it's in Exhibit 1. In my letter, number 51. Okay, thank you. Okay. Will you agree that the statement, having seen where it came from? Dollar figure? Yes, dollar figure on it. Okay. I would need a jury to make that determination. What about the Jerome Buting? Can you put a dollar figure on how much he's harmed your reputation? That would be the same answer. And Kathleen Zunner, she hasn't, so she's flipped from different theory to different theory. Now, law enforcement isn't even a suspect anymore. Plus, this is being used in the course of the defense of her client. So, I would have no standing in that. Well, I have something to add to that statement, but I'll do that in a later time. What about Dean Strang? Can you put a dollar figure on how much he's harmed your reputation? I would just repeat the same answer that I gave you for Jerome Buting and John Ferreck. Okay, Mr. Colborn, my last few pages here is about your medical records, and I'm going to try to not go through them one by one in the interest of time. So I'll just ask you a couple questions, and then we'll see how deep we have to go into these. Okay. Isn't it true that you were not prescribed anxiety and hypertension medication until 2 weeks after you filed the lawsuit, December 28th, 2018? That's 2 different prescriptions. Yeah, I can ask it this way. Isn't it true you weren't prescribed anxiety medication at any point before you filed this lawsuit? I don't recall the date I was prescribed. Well, you didn't go on anxiety medication when Making a Murder was released, correct? No. And you didn't go on anxiety medication the first year when you had told us you were experiencing all these backlash from Making a Murder, correct? Correct. And you didn't go on to within the second year after its release in 2017, correct? Do you have any medical record there is so I can look at that date? Yeah, Exhibit 120. Thank you. So, where is this date? Yeah, I'm trying to find it for you. So, the date is above the halfway down the page. It says today's visit. You saw Teresa Kruger-Junk, nurse practitioner, on Friday, December 28th, 2018. You see that? And then above that, there's a started talking busaprone and lisinopril. Thank you. Yes, okay. Yes, I see that. I see that date. Okay. And does that jog your memory as to whether it was December 28th, 2018 when you first started taking those medications? Yes. Okay, so now, not 1, not 2, but 3 entire years after Making a Murder was released, correct? Correct. And in fact, it was filing the lawsuit that seemed to raise your anxiety levels. Is that correct? No. Well, the lawsuit was filed in December of 2018, and above 11 days later is when you went on the anxiety and blood pressure medications, correct? I would have to check in the blood pressure because I thought it was preceding visit, but I'm not 100% positive. But certainly, it was on them by them visit. It was the fact that this just was never going away, probably. Okay, when do you think you went on? Is the greatest. Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt. That's okay. When did you think you went on blood pressure medication? So, because I have asthma, I have to have a visit every 6 months as opposed to a year. So, I thought it was a 6 month visit before that I would have gone on blood pressure medication. When would that have been approximately that date? Well, I'm assuming June of 2018. Okay, does asthma tend to cause high blood pressure? Do you know? My asthma is pretty well controlled, but I don't know the hypertension is byproduct of that having asthma, for lack of a better word. Okay, I'm going to hand you what were marked as Exhibit 117. This is another medical record. You can see about a third of the way down the pages. The date visit was December 14th, 2018, which should have been 3 or 4 days before you filed the lawsuit in the case. Do you see that? Answer, okay. And if you flip into the second page, in the very bottom, there's a note that says, informed patient, his blood pressure is slightly elevated. Discuss diet, salt restriction, exercise. He will monitor blood pressure at home and follow up if he notices it stays elevated. Did I read that correctly? Yes, you did. Does this jog your memory that? Yes. This was maybe the first time you had elevated blood pressure? Correct. So, 3 days or 4 days before you filed the lawsuit, correct? Exhibit 112 marked for verification. Okay, I'm going to hand you Exhibit 112, another medical report. This is from February 2018. Do you see that at the top? Where it says dictated in 2/19/18? Or no, I was looking and filed at 2/12/18, but okay. It says you were seen on 2/9/18. So anyway, February 18th, correct? Yes. Okay. If you could flip into the third page, it's page 155 that you want. Yeah, I also have 156, okay. You see it's just, got it. Off by 1. So this would have been 2.5 years or so after making the murderer's release, 2 years. Do you see that? Yes. Okay, and you filed out 2 screening questionnaires and with the depression questionnaire, and 0 means not all, and 3 is nearly every day. And you scored a 1 out of, I think, 30 points here. There's 10 items. Does that sound right to you? Okay, so there's a very low score on the depression scale, correct? Yes. Okay, and you were being honest when you completed this questionnaire? Maybe. I don't know if I was honest or not. I didn't want to be put on any sort of medication. Okay, well, this is, so I have stretched things, but I would think that for the most part, I was honest. It's either you're honest or you weren't. It's either you know or you don't. Okay, this is the only medical records are the only evidence we have for alleged anxiety, correct? Correct. Okay, the second questionnaire is the GAD, which is General Anxiety Disorder Questionnaire. Again, 0 means no anxiety at all, and every category you put 0, correct? Correct. Okay, on the next page toward the bottom in all caps there's a word that says psych with a colon. Do you see that? It is on 157. No, I don't see that. I think so. Do you see there's a page 156 of the medical report, and then there's a Colborn 157? Yeah, I have. So look at it. Oh, I see. Okay, look at Colborn 157. Yeah, that's the page I have. Colborn 157. Correct. And so do you see right here, psych at the top? Okay. And it's actually at the top of the bottom site. Yes. It says denies anxiety, depression, or mania. Yes. Do you see that? Yes. And that's accurate, correct? It's accurate that I denied telling her that I had it. Yes. Uh-oh. Okay. And again, all we have to go on is the terms of your anxiety and distress, emotional distress, is your medical records, correct? Mr. Burnett, let me object to the form of the question. Go ahead. And your testimony here today, that's all we've got, correct? Answer correct. Okay. I don't think I've given you Exhibit 123, but I'm about to. Okay, Exhibit 123 marked for identification, and this is another medical record you can see at the top under Encounter Information. It says 220 of 2019. Do you see that? Yes. Okay. About a year later. Is that right? Yes. Okay. Go to the second page of that document. At the very top, it says anxiety. Do you see that word? Yes. And you told the doctor your personal situation had improved. Do you see that? Uh-huh. Okay, and then there's not on the same page another generalized anxiety disorder questionnaire. Do you see that? Yes. And you put mostly zeros. You scored a 2 out of possible 21 points. Do you see that? Uh-huh. Yes. Okay, you were accurate in answering the questionnaire. Yes, Miss Walker, all right, so let's go off the record. I think I'm done, but I just want to check my notes. The videographer going off the record, 10:59. Brief recess held. The videographer will be back and record at 11:18. Mr. Burnett, Kevin, can I go ahead and make the statement before you start? Mr. Vick, sure. Mr. Burnett, we've had a chance to discuss the time arrangement off the record, and I suspect we exceeded the general rule for 7 hours. I've talked to Mr. Vick, and I'm going to let him continue to question Mr. Colborn with the recognition that most of the questions are going to be on the subject matter, on subject. Plates when you call dispatch, right? Yes. And at the end, it also includes testimony that you shouldn't have been, and you weren't looking at Miss Halbach's car when you made that call, correct? Well, there was some video footage inserted in there as well that I didn't do, like the knuckle cracking, Dean Strang stare down. None of that was during the testimony. Mr. Colborn, my question is different than that. It was at the very end of the clip. It includes testimony where you say again, you weren't looking at Miss Halbach's car when you made that call, correct? Yes. So it clarifies you were not looking at the back of the end of the 1990 Toyota Right. Mr. Burnett, objection. I don't know if it clarifies it or not. It doesn't appear to be because people seem to think I was. Would you agree with me that it shows you statingly explicit twice that you were not looking at the car when you made a call to dispatch? Does that address your concern that this exchange might give an impression that you were looking at the license plate when you made the call to dispatch? Mr. Burnett, objection form. Can you repeat, sir? Sure. So the fact that there's 2 explicit denials from you that you were looking at the car when you made the call to dispatch, does that address the concern that the exchange might give the impression that you, in fact, were looking at the car when you made the call? Mr. Burnett, same objection. No, it doesn't address my concern. Why not? Because that's not how I testified. I testified under oath, and my testimony wasn't portrayed accurately. But the testimony did include 2 explicit denials that you were looking at the car when you made the call to dispatch, correct? Yes, I've agreed to that. Let's look at Exhibit B in the Second Amendment complaint. Right? Yes. And then Mr. Link found the key after you handled the bookcase roughly, correct? Yes. And it includes that you did not touch the key, correct? Yes. Would you admit that the episode gets across each of the key points that Mr. Kratz elicited from you during the line of questioning in your testimony? Mr. Burnett, object. Form, answer, and the actual skill with which was presented is the problem. It makes it appear that I was answered when it's not. Question, would you agree that the substance that's presented, though it's the same in terms of the key points that Mr. Kratz was trying to solicit on your testimony on direct? Mr. Burnett, objection to the form. Yes, I will agree that a portion of the testimony about how I handled the bookcase and that I didn't touch the key are on the clip. The last question, the question before it, oh sure. Can I have that read back to me? Yes, please. Do you agree that Mr. Kratz was asking questions here to make it clear that this call didn't motivate you to frame Mr. Avery for the murder of Miss Halbach? Answer, yes. And to make clear that you didn't plant evidence against Mr. Avery. I don't know if this had anything to do with planting evidence, he was. Well, I guess if we go on the next page, Wes, I'm only on 47, and we're including 48. Oh, to be clear, it was asking about 47 and 48. Okay. If you like the moment of review, that's fine. Okay, I got it. Yes, that came up as well. Is there anything missing here that you would say is, crucial point in your testimony? Mr. Burnett, objection. Form. To start off, they eliminated my identification of myself when I answered the phone. I answered the phone. I said Manitowoc County Jail, Officer Colborn. I didn't identify myself as deputy. I eliminated that. People watching this, and I'm dressed in a law enforcement uniform. When I'm testifying, people automatically assume that I was working in 94-95. I'm a sworn law enforcement officer by eliminating that. Because if it was sworn law enforcement officer, my answering the phone would have been Manitowoc County Jail, Deputy Colborn. But I wasn't a deputy at the time. I'm non-sworn correction officer. So people now are like, he has law enforcement officer, but he doesn't do nothing with the information. And this is why you transferred the call to the detectives? Correct. Detectives and the sheriff? I had no authority to. Mr. Burnett, you got to let him finish. Yeah, I missed the end of your question, Kevin. The witness, I'm sorry. Is that why you transferred the call to the sheriff's office? Mr. Burnett, go ahead. Well, the jail is part of the sheriff's office, but that's why I transferred the call on to an investigator. Yes, sir. Do you know of the fact that reflected in the making of murder that you transferred the call to a detective? I'm not quizzing you on the contents of that, Mr. Colborn. I'm just asking if you know. I don't know if it's in making a murder or not. Let's look at a different clip, okay? This is episode 7 still. I'm looking at minute 17, second 36, minute 19, second 10, and I'm still sharing, yes. Video playing. So the clip that we just saw, Mr. Colborn, that makes clear that you received this call in 1994 or 1995 when you were corrections officer, right? Wishy-washy about that, unsure of himself, for instance. Have you ever planted any evidence against Mr. Avery? My response at trial was, that is ridiculous, no I have not. And then the second question Mr. Kratz asked me, have you ever planted evidence against anybody in the course of your law enforcement career? The whole question is eliminated. Instead, it looks like I answered, have you ever planted evidence against Mr. Avery by saying, I have to say this is the first time my integrity has ever been questioned. That doesn't come across very forcefully and convincing. It's hardly answering the question, so I don't believe that's an accurate portrayal. Do you feel that the accusations that were planted evidence against Mr. Avery were calling into question integrity? The question was, have you ever planted any evidence against anybody in the course of your law enforcement career? That's my answer to the question. Mr. Colborn, I'm going to move to strike. That wasn't my question. My question is leaving this for a second. Did you feel the accusations against you that you planted evidence against Mr. Avery that called into question your integrity as a law enforcement officer? Answer, yes. And do you feel like this scene shows you denying that you planted any evidence against Mr. Avery? I'm sorry, the scene of making a murder? Are you kidding me? Like, you just watched a clip and now they're questioning about the clip, and do you feel like the scene shows you denying that you planted any evidence against Mr. Avery? I'm sorry, the scene on making a murder? Question, sure. Answer, that you just showed me. The clip we just watched. Is that what you were asking about? The clip we just looked at. You deny having planted any evidence against Mr. Avery, right? Yes. Okay, last one. If you could move on to page 52, Exhibit B. Okay. Last one. If you could move on to page, okay. And if I'm interested in here where it starts, or maybe a quarter of the page down, it says redirected examination. Okay, I see it. So just looking at the section, okay. Yes, the Dean Strang asked about the subject matter during the cross-exam, yes. And then Mr. Kratz on redirect wanted to respond to some of the points that Mr. Strang had raised, right? Yes. Mr. Kratz wanted to make clear that you hadn't written a report about the call in 1994 or 1995. Yes. And that if you had written a report, you would have known that it was about, is that right? Correct. That you didn't know the call was even about Mr. Avery. Right? Correct. Is there anything I missed here that's key to understanding your testimony? Mr. Burnett, objection. Form. I explained in the presence of all these questions were in the presence of the jury. I explained in the presence of the jury my reason that I didn't write a report has been eliminated from my testimony. It just simply says I don't know what it would have been about, and that actually a question I received a call and transferred it to the detective division. There would have been no need to write a report every time you receive a telephone call and transfer it. Yes, but Andrew Colborn, you filed a report the day after Stephen Avery was released from prison about this very fucking phone call. Strange, don't you think? Certainly, there's no agency on the face of the earth that does a report about that, and the whole explanation eliminated from testimony there. Let's take a look at a clip. Okay, and this is still episode 7. It's about minute 23, 48, minute 24, 5-second mark. So the clip that we watched, again, it made clear that you didn't write a report in 94 or 95 about the call, correct? Yes. That if you had written a report, you would have known what it was about, right? Correct. And we can agree that, I know this is going, I think, and we can agree that the line about whether he knew the call was about Mr. Avery is not this clip, right? Looked at earlier, which was a statement you prepared on September 12th. Called it. Now, so would you agree that based on this document, at least what the document purports to say is that your statement was, in fact, kept in the sheriff's department safe? Yes. And yesterday you stipulated to the fact, right? Yes? Okay. Now you said that James Link had given some incorrect information to Sheriff Peterson. Yes? And how did you know that? The paragraph that reads, Sergeant Colborn said he was later informed by someone that the case was already solved and the right person was arrested. I never said that. And how do you know that that's what was passed on to the Sheriff Peterson? I'm reading it off the statement, so I wasn't there when I don't know what he said verbally to the sheriff. That was going to be my question, is whether the lawsuit, the other two, I don't believe so. How many of Making a Murder would you estimate would watch before you filed the lawsuit? Like, in what context? Minutes? Sure, minutes. Less than 30. How about as you sit here today? Do you have any sense of total number of minutes? And if you want to give me a range, that's fine. 45 to 60. Probably less than 60. 30 to 45. Is that so you only let me make sure I'm understanding that correctly? You have watched 30 to 45 more minutes of it, still 30 to 45 minutes total. Meaning? No. I've only watched an extra. 30 to 45 minutes, additional minutes? Oh, okay, gotcha. Sorry. So that's a total of like an hour to hour and 15? Possibly, yes. Mr. Vick, okay, this is a good time to take a break. I think you're right, but two of you made two denials that we saw in that clip earlier, right? Yes. I'd like you to look at Exhibit 2, which is your Second Amendment complaint. Oh, I actually have that one handy for once. I'd like for you to look at paragraph 33, and I'd like to read the paragraph. Okay? It says, a central part of Avery's defense at trial was that the plaintiff and other Manitowoc officers, Plantic, Hallbach's HUV, SIC, and the SUV, that's supposed to say SUV, and at the Avery salvage yard where Avery resided in the house trailer with plaintiff on the stand. Avery's attorneys played portions of this call to dispatch in an effort to convince jurors that he came upon the SUV at the undisclosed location on November 3rd, 2 days before it was found at the salvage yard. Cross-examining plaintiff about the contents of the call. Avery's attorney suggested that plaintiff was looking directly at the Hallbach's vehicle when he called dispatch. The claim is entirely baseless and false, and defendants knew of his falsity. And did I read that right? Yes. What is the basis for your allegation that the defendants knew of the falsity of the essential part of Avery's defense? Mr. Burnett, objection. Foundation, go ahead. They were sitting in the courtroom and saw my complete unedited testimony. Now, you were alone when you made the call to dispatch, you said, right? Yes. So you're the only one that would know for certain whether or not you were looking at Teresa Hallbach's car when you made that call, correct? Yes. And Avery's. And I don't have any eyewitnesses with me, no. And Avery's attorneys were suggesting the opposite, right? I wasn't really sure what Avery's attorneys were suggesting, and I don't want to speculate or tell you that it's the way they were doing because I don't know. But your testimony at trial, and but it's a sentiment that some people were saying at the time, right? Mr. Burnett, objection, foundation. Yeah. I'm sentiment that people expressed to you at the time. Yes. So then, Mr. Colborn, how can you say that my clients knew that Avery's defense attorney's theory was false? Mr. Burnett, objection. For the reason that I said, they sat in the courtroom the entire time. They were privy to information that the average citizen wouldn't have. Not necessarily, Andrew Colborn, because the Stephen Avery trial was broadcast on the internet, on the news sites, and it was also covered every single day on the news. And it was live streamed on the news website. So anybody and their mama that had internet and a computer could have watched the whole trial. Just saying. Again, we had a gag order, so when people would ask me that question, I always had to say, we can't discuss the case. There was a lot of people that didn't know for a long time that Brendan Dassey had confessed to investigators, and the investigators were able to locate evidence based on Brendan's confession. False confession. People may not have known that the murder weapon was hanging over his bed. People may not even know her bones were in the backyard after he mutilated her and burned her in his pit. Yes, the hypodermic needle hole in the case were made when a specimen of Avery's blood was drawn by Vladimir and stored in the vial in connection with the 1996 post-conviction motion in his wrongful conviction case. The procedure necessarily resulted in the creation of a hole in the rubber stopper. The Vladimir and drew the specimen from Avery in 1996 was prepared to testify that would happen in an instance. Did I read that correctly? Yes. What is the basis for your allegation in the next sentence, which is, having attended the trial in its entirety, defendants Riccardi and Demos were aware of the routine nature of the hole in the vial's rubber topper, and the phlebotomist who drew the specimen from the Avery was prepared to testify. Or let me rephrase that. Do you have a personal knowledge basis for making an allegation in that sentence I just read? I'm personally aware that your clients were in court for their entirety, and I've seen the Making a Murder episode where it's portrayed as a great day for the defense and a red letter day. That's what he said. Discovered vial they was assuming could have been filmed by your defendants, your clients, I'm sorry. Would it surprise you to learn that it didn't film it? Yes, they would. Do you recall that Norm Gahn is in there, in that section, when it's being discovered? I viewed the portion where Jerome Buting is making a call to counsel. Do you recall a little bit later Norm Gahn is in it too, who is one of the prosecutors? I know who Norm Gahn is, but I didn't review the portion of it. So why do you think that my clients were aware of the routine nature of the hole in the vial's rubber stopper, and that the phlebotomist that drew the specimen from Avery was prepared to testify? Do you have a personal knowledge to support the portion of your allegation? I don't recall the motion hearing where it was discussed, if I was present or not. I can't, again, a lot of these documents that are the work product of my counsel, I didn't compile all the information. Deputy Kaczarski, can you understand how they might have uncertainty about your three's explanation of the key came to found that day? Mr. Burnett, objection, Foreign Foundation. I don't have any intention to destruct the law enforcement, but trust law enforcement because I was in it for 27 years, so I like to think that my testimony, and when I say something, people understand that I'm under oath and I'm saying the truth. If I don't know the answer to the question, I say I don't know. But you can understand how people who didn't know you personally, I'm not saying that they necessarily think that you're lying, but how they could walk away from hearing an explanation of how the key was found and just say, I'm not sure about what happened. I'm not sure about what happened. Mr. Burnett, objection. Mr. Burnett, answer. My explanation of the trial was the only possible way I could think of that key got to where it was. I don't know anything other than the way because it was only a piece of furniture that had been searched. and then the key was discovered laying on the floor in an area we had previously looked. So I don't know. And I think we saw a document that Mr. Griesbach wrote yesterday where he said that he believed Stephen Avery was guilty, but he wasn't sure. So sure that the police didn't plant evidence. Do you recall that document? Yes. So if Mr. Griesbach wasn't sure, how can you expect my clients to have been sure? I don't know if Mr. Griesbach had all the information available to him when he made that statement, but the key was found in Stephen Avery's bedroom with Stephen Avery's DNA on it. Not my DNA, not Jim Link's DNA, not Deputy Charles's DNA, Stephen Avery's. But you understand that Mr. Griesbach was very interested in the Avery case, and he was a student of the case, right? Mr. Burnett, objection, form of foundation. Do you think it would be fair to call Mr. Griesbach a student of the Stephen Avery, the trial of Stephen Avery for the murder of Teresa Halbach? Mr. Burnett, same objection. He's certainly been involved in it, although not in the trial and investigation himself. He's written books about it. So again, I would ask, if he wasn't so sure that planting didn't occur, how can you say that other people should? You know, either knew or you absolutely should have known that the planting theory was false. Mr. Burnett, I object to the form of the question. I think it's argumentative and it's been asked multiple times and unanswered. Go ahead and answer if you have a further answer. I don't have an answer other than Mr. Griesbach didn't attend the trial. Now, finding that the key in Stephen Avery's trailer turned out to be the big deal into the investigation into the murder of Teresa Halbach, right? I don't know if one piece of evidence was more. I don't know if any one piece of evidence was more important than, I would say the discovery of her body in his backyard was probably more important. Body? They found a body? Oh, that's right. Because Andrew Colborn was searching the Barb Tadich Yonda residence with Bill Tyson, and they got called over to Cuss Road because they found a body. Correct. Miss Walker talked yesterday about certain things regarding a number of Miss Avery's prior crimes that were not presented in the jury also, right? Yes. We talked about that yesterday, yes. So I won't repeat the stuff that I went over yesterday, but I did want to talk about some other things that are included in making a murder. The President Steve Avery is negative light, and were not presented in the jury, but they're reflected in making a murder. Are you aware that making a murder includes Chuck Avery's statement that after Brendan Dassey's confession, he was, quote, pretty positive, and, quote, that Stephen probably had murdered Teresa Halbach? No, I hadn't seen that. And Chuck Avery is Stephen Avery's brother, right? Yes. And you are aware that making a murder includes a scene where Barb Tadich calls Stephen Avery that she hopes he burns in hell for what he did. Her name might be pronounced Tadic. But, no, I'm not aware of that. Are you aware that there's a scene in Making a Murder where Stephen Avery tells his parents that if they didn't figure out how to get him out of bail within 2 weeks, he was going to give up and kill himself? No, I'm not aware of that. Are you aware that there's a scene in Making a Murder where Stephen Avery himself opines that the prosecution was, quote, going to win anyway? No, I'm not aware of that. Are you aware that Making a Murder contains an interview with some people who say violent crime was in Stephen Avery's character and others who say it was not? Well, I have seen an interview where people say that the police did it or on Making a Murder. I haven't seen any clips or any video where people are saying that they believe law enforcement got it, so I'm unaware of that. I'm really trying to limit the number of clips I show you given our time crunch. Sure. So I'm going to pose a questions. Okay. Are you aware that there's a scene where Stephen Avery's sister says that a violent assault was not in his nature? No. Are you aware that there's a scene where a member of the media says that it was because he was one of the usual suspects around Manitowoc County? No. Are you aware that there's a scene where the preceding judge in the Penny Bernstein case says that he believed Avery's proximity against violence against women in particular was a fact? No, I'm not aware of that. Isn't it that a good example of Making a Murder showing different viewpoints and opinions regarding Stephen Avery's character? Mr. Burnett, objection. Go ahead. I would have to watch the entire thing to offer an intelligent answer on that. I haven't done that. So if you haven't watched a documentary and you don't know what it contains, how the fuck are you suing for this? because you receive phone calls and you assume things happen. I don't buy the fact that he did not watch his documentary one fucking bit. But my opinion means nothing. Are you aware that Under Sheriff Herman is interested in making a murder? No, I wasn't aware of that. Are you aware that extremely critical of Steve Neighbors' allegation and evidence planted? I'm not aware of that. Well, one thing that Andrew Colborn states that when he emails the new sheriff of Manitowoc, or the district attorney, which one of the two, sorry, I've been up for a really long time. I try to get facts as accurate as I can, but he emails him because he just listened to a radio program on WTMJ, AM 620, and they were talking about making her a murderer and addressing the key things that he seems to be bringing up in his lawsuit. So that email is on my channel too, and I'm sure there's still 335 more pages to go to, and there's also been another 6 documents added to this for a grand total of probably like, I don't know, maybe 600 pages of documents altogether, but I will continue. Are you aware that there's a scene in Making a Murder where he only denies the planting allegations but characterizes them as, quote, impossible, and quota, and quote, far-fetched, and quote? No, I'm not aware of that. Now, incidentally, you ran against Under Sheriff Herman to replace Ken Peterson as the sheriff of Manitowoc County, right? Yes, I did. But Making a Murder includes a clip of him. I'll represent the Making a Murder includes a clip of him very vigorously disputing the planting allegations that were made against the law enforcement officers. Are you aware of that? No. This is your position that Making a Murder is biased against law enforcement. Yes. Are you aware that Laura Riccardi has, while her human and imperfect for the most part, the criminal justice system does get it right? Let's see. I already told you about Under Sheriff Herman's calling the planting accusation far-fetched and impossible, right? Yes, sir. So I'm going to play you now something from episode 5, which I believe is one that you have seen, or parts of the episode. I take that back. I'm going to show you a clip from Norm Gone. Are you familiar with this scene? No. Video playing. Would you agree that the show's prosecutors pushing back quite vigorously against the planting theory? Yes. And they refer to the officers being accused of being good, solid, decent family men. All right? I don't think I saw that, but I don't recall hearing that. Hearing them say that, I thought inserting more around the testing of the blood, or that they had a right to have our reputations protected or something to that extent. I'll go to another clip that may be more directly about you. This is episode 7, and I'll just show the episode 5, 108, 234. Okay, and this is going to show now in episode 7, 1355 to 1428. Video playing. Mr. Cardi, you're in episode 5. Mr. Vic, oh, this is still in episode 5. My apologies. Now I'm on episode 7. Why would you agree that the show's Ken Kratz rigorously disputing the planting allegations? Mr. Burnett, objection form. That appeared to be an out-of-court interview. Yeah? With reporters, not in front of the judge, like the preceding one. Oh, you're absolutely correct. I'm not limiting this just to in the court, but saying, would you agree that this is an instance of Ken Kratz out of court to the media? I think the word he used was deplorable or describe planting theory. Is that accurate? Yes. So this is another instance where Making a Murder shows people pushing back strongly against the planting theory, right? Mr. Burnett, objection. This particular clip, yes. Have you ever seen the clip before? No. Okay, same thing, episode 27, episode 7. Now I'm going to 2429 to 2450. Again, this is going to be another one of the court, okay? Video playing. There's another instance showing someone. Yes, I've seen that one. Yeah, do you appreciate that one of was in this episode? I have to be honest with you, I don't appreciate anything about Making a Murder, but I appreciate that the reporter asked the question of returning strength. And do you appreciate that the reporter's question, and you appreciate that the reporter's question was then included to the episode? Without watching in entirety, I have to say my original answer, I don't appreciate anything about Making a Murder. I don't appreciate it at all. But you testify that you haven't seen the whole series, right? Correct? And you don't want to use my time showing you all the episodes, okay? I'll represent episode 7 at 34:45 to 35:08. If you have an interest in seeing these later, I'm sure your counsel could probably get it for you. Yes, there's another episode of Norm. There's another instance of Norm gone sticking up for you. And that's something you're aware is in Making a Murder. No, it's that one that just showed me, or it's a different one, okay? Are you aware that there's also footage, a scene of yet another instance of Norm Gone, this time at a press conference, where he's pushing back on the planting theory? Are you aware that during the press conference he calls it a, quote, despicable allegation? No, I'm not aware of that. Would you say that Norm Gone there, in calling it a despicable allegation, pretty accurately captures your own views of those allegations made against you and Lieutenant Link? Certainly. Are you aware of that? That it shows that Mike Halbach believes Stephen Avery was guilty and was lying when he claimed to be innocent? I'm not aware of the Making a Murder, no. So nobody has ever told you that Mike Halbach was in. There was a scene involving Mike Halbach giving his opinion that Stephen Avery was guilty and was lying as pertains to Making a Murder? Answer correct. That's correct. Are you aware that there's a scene in Making a Murder in which Judge Willis provides his view of Stephen Avery as, quote, probably the most dangerous individual to ever set forth in the foot in his courtroom? In Making a Murder? Yes, I'm in Making a Murder. No, I'm not aware of the Making a Murder. After the deposition, are you going to watch the entire series, do you think, Sergeant Colborn? What do y'all think he's going to say? Mr. Colborn, or Mr. Burnett, objection, form called speculation. As we sit here and talk right now, I don't have the intention, but I certainly will seek the advice of my counsel on it. Prior to bringing the lawsuit, did anybody tell you about the clips that you and I have discussed in the last hour or so in which various individuals defend you? Nope. Do you think that could change your overall view of the series? Nope. How could you know without watching them? Well, I can't. You just said that what to do, I think. So I thought you wanted me to render an opinion. Did John Ferrick columns typically include quotes from people in law enforcement who are defending you, who were telling, who were saying that they're despicable allegations that are being made? No, not that I recall. That's number 4. He said that. I like to look at Exhibit 1146. Thank you. This is another text between you and Brenda Schuler, right? Yes. And she says at the top, Andy, sorry to bug you, as you just deleted the emails not that long ago from you. Ken needs them again. Ken Kratz. He lost them. So sorry. Can you check your emails to me, please? Your sent file, please. And your response is, I may have hard copy, but I think I deleted them from my sent file anywhere else after Ferrick demanded all our emails. Would hard copy work? And she says, is that amended complaint? It is, yeah. Okay, Mr. Are you in a position to wrap this up? Mr. Vick, we are. Mr. Burnett, great. I'd like you to look at paragraph 37 specifically. Okay. So here you say, defendants Riccardi and Nemo strategically spliced reaction shots of plaintiff appearing nervous and apprehensive in the trial into other portions of the testimony where you did not appear nervous or apprehensive. In fact, do you see that? Yes. Do you recall that it was about your demeanor in any of the shots that made you look nervous, apprehensive? Was there anything that you can recall right now that made you feel that way? Specifically, the clip that you showed me that I commented on earlier, where it appears that Dean Strain is giving me some sort of stare down, and that it pans to the shot of me leaning back and cracking my knuckles. I did that during the recess out of the view of the jury. I certainly didn't do it in front of... Now, I like how they pick and choose what he wants to remember and what he can't recall. But it certainly doesn't make me look nervous and apprehensive and caught some sort of lie. Now, Mr. Colborn, I'm not sure if you're aware, but during the deposition the last couple of days, you kept your head down a decent amount. Does that sound right? I'm frequently reading, but yes. And you sometimes had your head in your hands or cracked your knuckles in course of this deposition. Does that sound right? Okay, I don't recall that, but I don't know what you want me to, what you're trying to. Can you clarify a little bit for me? Well, it is possible that maybe things like cracking your knuckles or looking down that's just a natural mannerism of yours. The footage that I've watched of my trial testimony, I frequently make contact with whoever is questioning me. Now, I was not in trial given a stack of documents like this and told frequently to go to this page, to go to that page, look at this. Yeah, but you did a deposition in Stephen Avery's lawsuit and you were acting shady as fucking that one. This is just notary. So, Exhibit 3, decision and order of wrongful conviction evidence. That will be my next read. I'm up to page 116 of 439. So that was Andrew Colborn's portion of his deposition from July 21st and 22nd. 21st is the video before this. This is the 22nd. I've yet to skim through all this, so I don't even know what's all in these documents. So yeah, this is all surprise to me as well as y'all. So y'all got any questions before I go to bed? No questions? Let me scroll through the chat. Oh, you're welcome. I was a little shocked at how much this cost, but well worth it. See y'all next time. Great day.